Welcome back to the Disaster Tough Podcast. I'm your host, John Scardina. I am so excited for this episode. If you want to back up like maybe a year or two, I think about a year and a half. It was the first time I met Vanessa Flores through Randy Steiner. So big shout out to him at University of California, Irvine. They have a phenomenal team. So I got to reach out to or say hi to Shane and Krista as well. Again, great team over there at UCI. And I had the opportunity to see how they operate up close. And then you fast forward to a dynamic populations course in St. Louis here this year, and we really needed somebody to understand mass care from an organizational perspective. And you have Vanessa Flores, the great Vanessa Flores. She came, she conquered, and she really won over like literally all the hearts of everybody there. We were just so impressed by the way that she addresses emergency management. And she, funny enough, she brought a level of professionalism to us. We already thought we were professional, and then we saw like a real professional do it. And we're like, oh, shoot, this is like a real professional here. And it's probably because of her military background. Yes, Zach is in the military as well. Big shout out. But she was able to really articulate that level of professionalism all the way through this exercise. It was really intense, and it was her first time with us, and it was just a knockout. And so I wanted her to come onto the podcast, and so she could introduce herself to the audience, if you will, and please learn from her and hear from her experience. And so without any further ado, with a window on the side, Vanessa, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, everybody.
So first things first, you were in the military.
Yes.
And now you're working for a university.
Mm-hmm.
Before we really get into all of that, like, can you just like maybe like take 30 seconds or so to like talk about how you got into EM and like why you're still in the field? Because you kind of took a unique path, if I recall.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I needed to join the military just because I was not really doing well on the outside.
It was that or jail?
Yeah, I'm not to that extreme, but down that path. So I went to the recruiter and, obviously I went to the Navy first, and then I talked to some friends and they're like, please go walk across the street to the Airforce before you sign anything. So sure enough, I did that. And they were showing me all the living accommodations. And so I got sold on emergency management because it was the next available job. So I took it and, did it for 12 years. And actually my education background is human resources because I just like working with people. So I figured, you know what? I've already learned this job. The education is, from the military. So let me try something else because when I get out, I'm going to do something different. So 12 years later, had my daughter, decided to punch so she can come home and be with her cousins and grow up with them like I did. And then thought, let's go to HR. Let's do this, right? Couldn't find a job. Lo and behold, I just didn't have the experience. Regardless of how much education you have, they did not care. So I found myself back in emergency management at the Naval Weapons Station in Seal Beach as their emergency management officer. So I kind of feel like it chose me at that point, because at that point it's like, well, we're doing this then. So since then, I was kind of feeling around the federal, trying to learn the Navy side of it, and then realized I've done this. I don't want to continue doing this, at least for the federal side. I feel like I need to expand and really put my EM skills to the test and see what I can do in a different industry. So I found the job at the University of California in Irvine. And Randy Steiner's been great. And I absolutely love higher education. It's been awesome. I've been there for 2.5 years and absolutely love it.
If I was going to go back into like the other side of the house, I couldn't go into local government. I think I could do feds again, but I want to be a dad. I think the most complex style of emergency management right now is probably for universities. It's the most challenging. You have a living population. You have a population that changes every day, and a bunch of PhDs who are focused on their PhD. And so it makes an interesting dynamic for you specifically. And I can see why that'd be a fun challenge for sure. The L3 Harris Extreme 400P radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapse and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio at l3harris.com right now. If you served in the military, you've probably worn Proper Apparel. Proper Apparel is now reaching out to first responders and those who love the outdoors. Check out Proper Apparel, from the outdoors to the EOC, wear proper. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today.
Absolutely. I mean, you're dealing with faculty, which has been new for me, researchers who, like you said, have their own mindset, have their own idea of what they feel is important. And, their research is always the most important research. And we really, as emergency management, have to kind of balance that out and determine, really what's going to be the priority at that time for not only the researchers, but also for the students and the faculty as well. So it's kind of that finding that balance. But I do enjoy doing emergency management for higher education because I feel like I'm setting the stage for my daughter to be able to come in and know, hey, when you go to UC Irvine, it's a safe place. I know that because I created the evacuation zone signs there. And
awesome.
So it's super cool. Yes. So my cousin actually just started this year. So I think that was really cool to be able to tell her and kind of walk her around and be like, okay, those signs, this is me, the QR code, make sure you sign up for Zod Alert, all that stuff. So it was just really neat.
I really hated those QR. No, it was awesome. I love UCI, and you guys have done a lot of great things there. I talk about the Dream Team. There's other campuses. They have like something like 15 emergency managers, and while I think that's cool, sometimes I wonder like what they're actually doing. But when I look at your team of 4, I'm like, oh, this is how a university could be designed. Like this Dream Team of 4. And then everybody should hire Doberman Emergency Management and this supplement. No, I think you guys really have something figured out. The reality is like one of the things that I find fun about campus emergency management and healthcare emergency management is at the National Cancer Institute. I had to do the same thing, especially when you do like business continuity planning. You're going up to a doctor who has poured their heart and soul into their research. And I get it. They're there long days, year after year. They're trying to do this, figure out this hypothesis. And somehow you have to tell them, hey, doctor, I know you're trying to make shrooms more potent, but this really isn't cutting edge. And you're like, how dare you? You know, it's like, ugh.
Yeah, that's their life you're talking about right there.
Yeah, and it is there. And for them, that is the thing, right? Like they can't think about anything else. And that's why they're doing what they're doing. How do you balance that as an emergency manager, especially with dealing with faculty and dealing with researchers and trying to understand different priorities and needs? A campus doesn't want to look like a prison, right?
Right.
And yet it needs to be safer than one, probably. So how do you navigate that?
So I think the first part is really just being educated on exactly what their needs are. And I think the most recent example I have is the vivarium. So again, coming from the military, going to higher education, I had no idea what a vivarium even was.
You're talking like Black Panther stuff right now, or what?
No. So what we did was like, hey, can you give us a tour, first of all, and found out super cool things about the university I didn't even know. So went on a tour, let them explain it, let them educate you on exactly what it is that they do, what their needs are, how their operation works, so that when you take that back to emergency management, we can kind of look at our plan to say, okay, how can we help them, or how can we actually make that bridge or that link in an emergency situation to make sure that whatever your needs are being communicated, but at the same time, making sure that we take that opportunity to also educate them on our operation to say, okay, so you're feeding into this, which is our emergency operations center, and you're reaching into this person because this person is going to direct us on and be that liaison to tell us what your needs are to help you during that emergency. So, gathering all that data from everybody across of the campus and being able to kind of make that assessment in the EOC is probably what's going to help us be able to make those determinations and those big decisions, right? So most of the time, they don't even know what the EOC is, just like I didn't know what the vivarium was. So really just bridging that gap, I think, is huge.
I'm trying to report to the EOC. What's the EOC? EOC. It's an acronym. Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. And getting back to that campus perspective, because this is everybody's opportunity right now to learn about campus emergency management and really like your perspective of crossover. We're kind of dangling it, but what were your core responsibilities in the Air Force in emergency management? Are they different? And if they are different, what are your core responsibilities now?
So 100% different, especially for the Air Force. We're the only service that has a dedicated emergency management career field. So growing up in that career field, it really starts from the bottom. They focused on equipment, and we actually were emergency responders to sea-burn incidents at that point. And then as we grow in rank, we then move up to, we get to be in the EOC now. We manage the teams, and then we get to be in the EOC as the ESF5. And then as you get a little bit higher, then they'll put you in the EOC manager position or coordinator position. And then you kind of just move up from there. So you kind of learn both sides of the house, and the response side, and then also the EOC side. So obviously that's pulled away in higher education. We don't do any responding other than going to the Emergency Operations Center. And we do a lot more of the planning aspect of it ahead of time, which personally for me, I enjoy much better. I just could not get into like the response, suiting up.
What?
I know, right?
I love the response stuff.
I cannot just sweat and taping everything up. It was just
my gosh. That's like that's like the best feeling. I'm like, yeah.
No.
You're like seeing your boss who's like on his 5th day of wearing the exact same outfit, and it's like, you're just like trying not to make this look. If you're watching the video right now, you're like,
right, exactly.
But you're all like that, and you're like thinking like they're the smelly person, and then you walk into like another room, and you're like, nobody else is. Oh
like,
no,
wait, is it me?
I'm the only person. But like, I love that response stuff.
It was not for me. It was not. So being able to kind of pull that away and then just focus on the planning and the writing and all that is totally my realm right there. So I truly enjoy that, and that's kind of where I thrive.
I have seen your writing firsthand, and it is phenomenal. Also, this is like the shout out episode to Maxine and Sai, who are also working with us and writers. Just really incredible people.
Super amazing.
I need to have Sai on this episode, on this podcast sometime.
Sai, you're next.
Sai, you're up.
Here's your call out.
I have a video of her mom on Instagram for all those who are listening, literally dancing with her mom, Sai's mom. So,
Sean's dancing skills are on par.
All right, let's go. Yes, my one move that I still remember from salsa way back when. Okay, so if it's 100% different, this is like the problem. I actually just talked to Shad. He's the director of Portland. I think it's going to come out the week after yours, to be honest. But we just had this conversation about like emergency management identity crisis. The Readiness Lab is really trying to address that by, whether people like it or not, creating standards. Hey, we wear the black shirt, color coded for the different sections. It's okay to wear a t-shirt in EOC so you don't sweat. There's a thing. There you go. There's lots of things that we're trying to do to create a brand, more than a logo, but a brand of emergency management, because we'll go in there and people have no idea what emergency management is. And it's like half the time you're just trying to explain your vision, and then you leave and somebody else gives their version. Right. And it's like, and you're trying to fight like the tide, like, hey, we just want to do a quick pause X to thank our sponsors, L3 Harris, Proper, Paladin by Acela, Impulse, Doberman Emergency Management, and especially all of you who have been donating to our podcast. Thank you for helping us boost the signal. All right, let's jump back in. How do you deal with that? If it's 100% different, then how can you even say that, I don't know, like we're a field? I don't know.
Okay, so just to your point about it being different. So in the military also, it depends on who that leader was. Sometimes they changed out every 2 years. Sometimes it was every 4 years, right? But it was like, hey, we're going to focus really, really heavy on CBRN. And it's like, that's that person's focus. They think that's super important. So we all transition to all this training, and that's what everybody wants to push. Change of leadership, it goes back this way, and they're like, hazmat, that's what we need this, and it's back on that, and it's just kind of back and forth, so you can really never get that broad scope of exactly what it is you're supposed to be doing. It's just whatever that leader wants you to do, and that's kind of how I felt in there. So I feel like coming out into the higher education realm, I was kind of able, you really focus on those core concepts of what the basic emergency management focuses on. So, your preparedness and those different pillars to be able to say, okay, let's look at every different area and make sure, whatever we're supposed to be doing based off of our jurisdiction or whatever type of institution you're working at for emergency management, that you're covering those bases. So if you're doing something like leadership change, like regardless of what they say is the priority, yeah, you can adjust accordingly, but you're still covering your areas and you're still doing the basic emergency management standards, right?
Copy. So I get that. Why Air Force for emergency management? Not like, I don't know, National Guard, Army. I get Marines.
Yeah.
But
well, I told you I went to the Navy first, and they were like, you're going to travel everywhere. You get to go see all these places.
Yeah.
But they didn't tell you how much time that you actually spent at those places versus how much you actually spent on the boat. So I was already sold. I was ready to sign. And thank goodness I didn't, because again, I went to go talk to my friends about it because I didn't know anything military before then. Yeah. There was nobody in my family that was military for me to, talk to or educate from or anything like that. So it was kind of just, hey, friends, this is what I'm doing. They're like, oh, I had a buddy, thank goodness, that was, he had a cousin in the Air Force. And he's like, I would go to the Air Force recruiter. So I did. And they were just like, here's your living conditions. And, points out the differences between the services. And
sure,
kind of a no-brainer at that point. But like I said, I was in a position to sign regardless, just because of my circumstances. So it really didn't matter at that point.
I guess my question is like, why does the Air Force do emergency management versus the other branches? Is there a specific reason, or is it luck of the draw?
I'm not sure. I know they have it as the dedicated career field, but I believe the Army actually does the CST, which is the
that's pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. So they are super awesome, but that's all they do, right? So they practice. It's like fire department. That's all they do. They practice those skills. They do it, and they're like to a T. I mean, it's so seamless. I'm not sure why the Air Force decides to kind of separate or actually combine those two. And I think that's kind of what the problem was. And when I was back in, they kept talking about how they were going to separate it and do like, okay, there's going to be emergency management planning, and then there's going to be emergency management response, which is kind of going to be like the CST of the Army. But they never did that. So
you're hurting me. I'm listening to you. I'm going to have a general on here. I'm going to set everybody the record straight. In fact, Colonel McKinney is now General McKinney.
Yes.
A big shout out to him, who's been on the episode. And man, that guy has just figured things out. I like him so much. He's in UCOM right now, so hopefully he's doing well.
Yep.
But maybe it's time to revisit that like military emergency management conversation.
Yes.
I get a lot of flack when I talk about how the National Guard and specifically, but Air Force would be included in that. The military standards perspective, that professionalism piece that I called out right at the beginning, emergency management could use more of that. And people really try to push back on standardization. I think sometimes it's because they're afraid that they won't be able to do so much in their job. I think other times, in a rare case, it's because somebody is afraid that they'll realize that they're not doing emergency management and that standards will exclude them. However, the reality remains the most important function of emergency management is to make sure that people aren't hurt, that functions still happen, that property isn't damaged, and to coordinate all those pieces. And if our stakeholders don't really know what we do or respect that, we're an afterthought, or they don't know what it looks like when we show up on scene. I push really hard against wearing vests, for example, because we're not construction workers. Right.
I agree.
And we're not wearing the suit because we're not the FBI. Right. So like, what are we? Like, what is the persona of emergency management? And that's what I was talking to Shot about. So it's kind of a heads up to everybody's listening now. They're going to hear all about that next week. From the standards piece, from that rigid perspective of being in the military for 12 years and then moving over into a different realm. How did that transition work out for you? Was it difficult? Did you love it? You're like, finally, I'm free. I get to wear, whatever I want. Or you're like, oh man, like we could really use a lot more of this. Like, what were your thoughts on that?
So to be honest, I even saw that between the Air Force and the Navy. So coming from the Air Force, we have our, Air Force instructions that I could spit back anything, or at least go and, control find and be like, oh, there it is right there. Says you have to do this. Or, it was just so fine-tuned over there that there really wasn't a whole lot of room for the muddy areas. And then I go to the Navy and I'm looking for like, well, where's the instruction? What are we supposed to be doing here?
What is the guidelines here? Yeah.
So there was instruction, but it was a lot more broad, right? You had a lot more room to interpret things. And so that left room for a lot less standardization because everybody kind of interpreted it their own way and ran their program that way. So when we all came together as like, here's all these bases, like, well, we're definitely doing things significantly different. And we're all tying it back to this one regulation where I felt like Air Force definitely had it laid out. So then going into higher education, really, really lost because they do have their NFPA standards, but at the same time, really open for interpretation on some of those. And it really just makes for all these different programs all over the place, which is why we have to collaborate so much to be like, well, how are you doing, this concept? And how are you doing this concept? And then you take lessons learned and be, oh, I kind of like the way they did that, but I don't like this. So I'm going to change that. And they're so different. They're just crazy. I'm such a big standardization person. Like I thrive on standardization and I push for it so much, but like you said, not everybody feels the same way. And so you can push all day, but if the top's not supporting it, you're not going to get it.
When can we start saying that those people are wrong?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, I think there's a fear that if you create a standards, then you can't operate.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm much more, I started using like vernacular, and we only have a couple minutes here, where I'm like, okay, foundations. Like, as long as you have the consistent foundation of branding, style, approach, needs, and scope, then you can say, hey, at my institute, the thing that we care most about is X. Let's say it's the human caused disasters, counterterrorism, sea burn, whatever. But you get to still fall back on that baseline. Right. At the same time, if you can go somewhere else, it's the reason why, you fit in really well with that dynamic populations course. It's brand new. It's not based off any standards. It's not based off of what anybody else is doing. It's totally different from the field. And yet somehow it is also based off of standards and best practice and that foundational understanding. And everybody should be on the same page of what emergency management does and does not do. We talk about security in that class. We're not teaching people how to go and handcuff people or detain people, right? But they still can be involved in that process. Your final thoughts here. We just have a couple minutes. We're definitely going to have to do a part 2. And I'm lucky to have you on the show.
Thank you.
If you're talking to my audience right now who are in the military looking to transition into emergency management other than military, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would think it would be to find that organization, core organization of emergency managers. So for example, I found the University and Colleges Caucus. I found it late though. So going into higher education, I wish I would have known that was a thing early on to be able to kind of grasp that knowledge and understanding of exactly what it is and get involved and be able to ask, your peers that are doing the same thing, more questions. And I am not afraid to ask questions. I just need to know who to ask, but I will go and ask the questions and get the answer, right? So being able to kind of find that group of people is going to be the most important thing. So like I said, a year and a half into it, I found that, and I just kind of flourished from there. So now I'm a part of a working group on there and all kinds of stuff, and really kind of just expanded my expertise in that just by asking questions. So that would probably be my thing is find that organization.
Would you say that you flourished from there? There's the dad joke. Okay. The military perspective and transitioning needs to happen because there's a lot of people who would look to get into emergency management, whether from adjacent field or maybe doing it in the Air Force, for example. And we need to figure out how to help those people get over here all the time. Vanessa, the field is very lucky to have you. We were lucky to have you at DIPOP, and we hope to see you at future DIPOPs. If we still do them, they do kill me every time.
Yeah.
But
they're so awesome. You have to keep doing those. They're the best.
I know. Well, we have great instructors and amazing students, and that's really what it comes down to.
It's a fun class.
Thank you for taking a few minutes out of your time to chat with me. And if you want to reach out to Vanessa because you're thinking about working at a university or you're transitioning out of the military, you can send us an email, of course. We always say that, but we stopped giving the email address because we want you to comment on social media. Vanessa is on social media. Yes. You can tag her on LinkedIn, or you can just put out the comment to the field. I bet there's a lot of people who have similar questions. reach out to the community. If you got something out of this podcast, which you should have because it's incredible, Vanessa's awesome, you can give us that 5-star rating and subscribe. Make sure you check out TRL Insider. It's a new thing that we're doing. It's another way to get involved with the community, especially online, as we're all spread out. And we'll see you for the next one. Peace.
Thank you.